Part 21. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuchi. Chapter 201. After finally taking advantage of Zhang Fenjai's brief state of unconsciousness, Zhang Huijing had the opportunity to get his favor. She didn't want to pay attention to the ringing of the mobile phone in her bag. But the ringing that refused to stop not only affected the ambiguous atmosphere at the scene, but also gradually made Zhang Fenjai wake up from his state of unconsciousness. Helplessly, Zhang Huijing could only get up and find her bag quickly, then took out her mobile phone and prepared to turn it off, but when she found that the number displayed on the screen of the mobile phone was the man who gave her a prosperous life but did not treat her as a human being, the fear that suddenly emerged in her heart made her shudder and answer the phone immediately. How is it possible? When the sad crying sound came from the phone, and the other party intermittently said the news that the man who made her hate and fear suddenly died, Zhang Huijing was completely stunned. Because the man who had ruled Zhangqiao village for nearly 10 years and occupied her for 7 years just celebrated his 45th birthday last month. How could he, who was as strong as a bull and had no diseases, suddenly die unexpectedly? However, when the beautiful ringtone of the phone that had just been hung up rang for the second time, Zhang Huijing immediately came to her senses from her daze. After taking a look at the familiar number on the caller ID, she quickly answered the phone. When she heard the sad cry coming from the phone, she suddenly felt a little uneasy and asked hurriedly, "Sister-in-law, stop crying first, tell me what happened." "Huijing, come back soon, your third brother just left." After hearing the reply on the phone, Zhang Huijing, whose face turned pale as paper, fell to the ground with weak legs. Because the third brother who had just had an accident was not only her biological brother with the same father and mother, but also her second backer in Zhangqiao village, and the mainstay for her to control the commercial street and the auto repair shop. Now, she has lost 2 backers who can support her one after another. How should she, a weak woman, deal with the covetous opponents and protect the wealth accumulated by the village committee? Just as Zhang Huijing was in grief and panic, the mobile phone that fell to the ground rang a beautiful ringtone for the 3rd time. When she saw the number displayed on the mobile phone screen was the opponent who was most capable of competing for the wealth of the village committee, Zhang Huijing's sad expression was instantly replaced by solemnity. She took a deep breath, tried to adjust her panic, and then answered the phone to prepare for the opponent's stormy attack, but she got the opponent's equally unexpected death. At this time, having lost the opponent who could threaten her status and safety, Zhang Huijing gradually calmed down from the panic. At this moment, facing the continuous unexpected deaths, she suddenly thought of what Zhu Zhenjun said when he made her thirsty for the fish monster's blood, and the request he made, and a terrifying idea gradually emerged in her heart. And the continuous ringing of the phone and the bad news of people's deaths on the phone gradually confirmed the terrifying idea, and also let her find her opportunity to completely turn over. Thinking of this, Zhang Huijing stood up quickly, continued to answer the calls that kept coming, and then walked away from the riverbank along the cornfield quickly, without saying hello to the gods she longed to receive blessings from. Looking at Zhang Huijing who was leaving quickly, Zhang Fenjai's eyes flashed with a confused look. If the other party was eager to receive the protection of his grace because of his fear of the existence of ghosts and gods, then he should not give up the only chance to succeed. But the other party decisively gave up the opportunity to get the grace just because of the information revealed in a few phone calls, and even ignored herself who was regarded as a god by her. Could the temptation brought by power and wealth completely overcome the fear of ghosts and gods in human hearts? Pop! The flames that were completely burned by the talisman burned the fish demon's body to ashes, and suddenly there was a slight sound of falling to the ground, which gradually woke Zhang Fenjai up from his confused state. Since you can't see through it and can't figure it out, then don't add trouble to yourself by looking for trouble. So, he reached out to zip up his pants, and Zhang Fenjai walked to the fish demon's body that had completely turned into ashes, and then mobilized his spiritual power to assist his palms to strike out a strong palm wind, blowing away the ashes in front of him. When the ashes were completely blown away, a crystal clear bead the size of a longan, under the illumination of the silver moon, emitted a charming light. Bending over to pick up the crystal clear bead, Zhang Fengjai carefully examined it against the moonlight above his head, and found that there was a drop of water inside the bead, a drop of water that was slightly emerald green. He mobilized his spiritual power to open the heavenly eye, and observed the emerald green water drop inside the bead again, and found that it was just an ordinary drop of water. He placed the bead in the palm of his left hand, pressed the index and middle fingers of his right hand on the bead, and then used the pulse cutting technique to check, and the result was exactly the same as the result of the heavenly eye. Although the crystal clear bead is very beautiful and may be very valuable, he is more interested in the water drop inside the bead. Since the sky eye and the pulse cutting technique could not detect the abnormality of the green water drop, Zhang Fengjai planned to directly break the defense of the bead and take out the water drop inside for further inspection. He pinched the bead tightly with the index and middle fingers of his right hand, took a deep breath, and then mobilized the strength of his steel-like body to crush it. But the result was that his fingers were a little painful because of excessive force, and the bead was intact. Unwilling to give up, Zhang Fengjai placed the bead on the cement steps, stepped back a few steps, mobilized his spiritual power to condense a long sword, and then slashed the bead directly with a move that could split Huashan Mountain. Bang! Accompanied by a strong impact, the long sword condensed by spiritual power was directly bounced away, and the bead was still intact. After dispersing the long sword condensed by spiritual power and quickly picking up the bead without any damage, Zhang Fengjai's face was not only not depressed, but also showed an excited look. Because it can withstand the double destruction of physical strength and spiritual power in succession, it is enough to prove that the bead in the fish monster's body is definitely not an ordinary product. Although he was unable to recognize the true origin of the bead and the water droplets inside the bead due to his own vision and experience, he had a knowledgeable and Taoist master behind him. After happily putting away the bead, Zhang Fengjai quickly cleaned up the remaining traces of the fight at the scene, and then returned to the fish house in a good mood. As it was already late and he had drunk a lot of liquor in the afternoon, Zhu Zhenjun forced him to stay in the room on the second floor of the fish restaurant to rest, saying that it was unsafe to drive at night. In response, Zhang Fengjai, who wanted to help others, not only nodded in agreement, but also quietly left the room at midnight and sat cross-legged on the roof of the fish restaurant to meditate and practice. In the early morning of the next day, he Tong, with a ruddy face, kept his head down and dared not look directly at Zhang Fengjai. Zhu Zhenjun could not hide the smug smile on his face. "Brother, thank you." Putting his hand on Zhang Fengjai's shoulder, Zhu Zhenjun thanked him gratefully, and suddenly looked out the door with surprise on his face. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 202. In Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant. The surprise on Zhu Zhenjun's face immediately caught Zhang Fengjai's attention. He quickly turned his head to look outside the door. He found that on the commercial street outside the fish restaurant, dozens of trucks marked with armed police, more than a dozen police cars marked with public security, and 7 ambulances from the hospital were passing by quickly. "Brother Zhu, go and pack up immediately. Let's leave here quickly." Watching dozens of police cars and ambulances whizzing past Zhangqiao village, Zhang Fengjai suddenly realized that the number of villagers in Zhangqiao village infected by the fish monster's evil spirit was probably far beyond his imagination. Otherwise, it would not have attracted the country's high attention, so that a large number of armed police and police would be sent out. At the same time, sudden death without any signs and the loss of internal organs in the body for no reason can easily be suspected of being a destructive infectious disease, which will completely block the entire Zhangqiao village, and even block the area within a radius of dozens of miles. In order to avoid being trapped in the fish restaurant and affecting his appointment with Zhuang Jian in the evening, Zhang Fengjai decided to leave here quickly before the commercial street was blocked. Zhu Zhenjun, who also realized that something was wrong, quickly handed the car keys to He Tongtong and asked her to drive Zhang Fengjai back to the villa in Guanghe Huafu first, while he took out his mobile phone to call a taxi. Because the Bugatti Veyron sports car not only has only 2 seats, but also the specially modified seats and space cannot meet the conditions for 3 people to ride at the same time, so he can only let Zhang Fengjai and his beloved woman go first. In this regard, He Tongtong, who knows the general situation, did not argue too much. He reached out to take the car keys handed by Zhu Zhenjun, and then stepped on the accelerator to take Zhang Fengjai away from the commercial street. However, when the sports car came to a small park on Huancheng West Road, He Tongtong suddenly stepped on the brakes. Zhang Fengjai could guess the reason why He Tongtong stopped suddenly, and he did not wait for her to speak, and he opened the car door and walked down directly. Then, the Bugatti Veyron quickly turned around and returned along the original route. After taking a look at the environment of the small park, Zhang Fengjai walked to the flowerbed near the road, and then sat on the cement steps, waiting for Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong to arrive. According to the speed of the Bugatti Veyron and He Tongtong's relatively skilled driving skills, combined with the distance between the small park and the fish restaurant on the commercial street, it would take less than 7 minutes at most. When the waiting time exceeded 15 minutes, Zhang Fengjai immediately realized that Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong might have been trapped in the fish restaurant on the commercial street. So, he immediately took out his mobile phone to contact Zhu Zhenjun, and found that the other party's mobile phone signal had been blocked, which made him immediately decide to return to the fish restaurant on the commercial street. First of all, don't look at Zhu Zhenjun being polite and obedient in front of him, that's because of his origin and strength as a Taoist monk, so he has to be obedient. But what about the reality? Born into a top wealthy family and with a sense of superiority as a successful businessman, Zhu Zhenjun, who is aloof and arrogant, does not take anyone seriously. If he had not persuaded and suppressed him, Zhang Fengjai was worried that he would have a dispute with the armed police and police who blocked the commercial street, which would cause a lot of unnecessary trouble. Secondly, he suddenly found that he had overlooked a very serious hidden danger. That is, a large number of villagers in Zhangqiao village suddenly died without any signs, and their internal organs were severely corroded, which would also attract the attention of the Supernatural Research Institute. If the Supernatural Research Institute also sent experts to investigate, he was worried that Zhang Huijing, who did not have much fear of ghosts and gods, would take the initiative to reveal the process of his fight with the fish monster, thereby revealing the Taoist method he used to condense objects and transform, and then expose that he was the one who used Taoist magic to kill the people of the Gukang sect in public. Therefore, he had to find a way to make Zhang Huijing shut up completely before the experts of the Supernatural Research Institute arrived in Zhangqiao village. However, before that, he still needed to call Zhuang Jian in advance to inform her, so that she would not mistakenly think that he was breaking his promise. But when he looked up Zhuang Jian's phone number, the phone in his hand suddenly vibrated. When he saw that the phone number displayed on the screen was Zhuang Jian, Zhang Fengjai quickly answered the call. Then, Zhuang Jian's heavy voice came from the phone. "Zhang Fengjai, the hunting plan tonight is temporarily cancelled. I have an urgent task to deal with." "Okay, I got it." Originally, he called to tell the other party that he might not be able to participate in the hunting of cat demons tonight. Since the other party took the initiative to cancel the hunting plan, it just happened to be what he wanted, so Zhang Fengjai quickly nodded in agreement. After hanging up the phone, Zhang Fengjai immediately reached out to stop a taxi, and then returned to the commercial street. In Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant. As he watched the armed police and policemen outside the door setting up cordons to block the commercial street, Zhu Zhenjun reached out and stroked He Tongtong's short hair, complaining with a slightly distressed and helpless tone. "You little fool, why did you come back so early?" Facing Zhu Zhenjun's complaints, He Tongtong responded with a hint of tenderness in her eyes. "You big fool, why did you let me send Yezi to the city, but you stayed here alone? You He Tongtong's tender question made Zhu Zhenjun speechless and he didn't know what to refute. He could only hug her tightly in his arms. At this time, two doctors in white coats rushed in without asking Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong for their opinions. Then a doctor wearing black framed glasses instructed another thin doctor holding a pen and a notebook. The environment and sight line here are open enough, which is very suitable for building a temporary anatomy center. You will arrange those big guys to clean up this place for me in a while. Got it, Director Chien. The thin doctor nodded quickly and wrote it down in the notebook. In addition, let those big guys smash all these walls for me to facilitate academic exchanges during the anatomy process. Director Chien pointed to the walls that were specially used to separate the private rooms and ordered. Got it, Director Chien. And clean up these messy decorations on the wall to avoid affecting the attention of several experts. Got it, Director Chien. Zhu Zhenjun was very dissatisfied with someone who rashly broke into the fish restaurant and disturbed the warmth between him and Tongtong. Now, seeing the two doctors who broke into the fish restaurant without permission, not only did they not take the initiative to say sorry, but they also planned to renovate the fish restaurant without the owner's consent, which immediately aroused Zhu Zhenjun's arrogant anger. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 203. Weishan Lake Fish House. Bang. Zhu Zhenjun slammed the table suddenly and yelled angrily. Get out of here right now. The sudden sound of slamming on the table startled two doctors who were discussing the renovation of the fish house. Later, when he heard Zhu Zhenjun's obviously humiliating rebuke, Director Chien's face immediately darkened and he asked. Boy, what did you just say? I want you to get out of this fish house immediately, right now. Pointing at the door of the fish house, Zhu Zhenjun scolded with the same gloomy expression. Zhu Zhenjun scolded him further in humiliation, causing Director Chien's gloomy expression to gradually turn to ashen. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth in a threatening manner. Boy, I am the chief physician of the Department of Infectious Diseases of the First People's Hospital and the deputy director of the Ningji Center for Disease Control and Prevention. I am also one of the persons in charge of investigating the cause of the infectious disease outbreak in Zhangqiao village. Do you know that what you just did has violated the laws of the country and seriously threatened the safety of the people? I have the right to ask the police outside to arrest you directly. Facing Director Chien's threat, Zhu Zhenjun's eyes flashed with disdain, then he sneered and said the same threat. Old guy, believe it or not, just one phone call from me can not only remove you from all your official positions, but also make it impossible for you to find a job in your life. Zhu Zhenjun's arrogant and overbearing threat made Director Chien, who was well versed in human relations and worldly knowledge, feel that something was wrong. He then squinted his eyes to observe the other person's clothes. It's a pity that Zhu Zhenjun's short-sleeved shirts and trousers worth tens of thousands were completely scrapped due to last night's crazy work, and he could only temporarily wear the street stall goods that He Tongtong bought for him in the morning. At the same time, nearly 3 crazy tossings not only consumed too much of his energy, but also made his concentration not sharp enough. Not only did he always wear slippers, but he also forgot to put on a luxury watch worth hundreds of thousands. Therefore, when he saw that Zhu Zhenjun's total outfit did not exceed 200 yuan, Director Chien immediately became arrogant and arrogant. Boy, it seems that if I don't give you a clue today, you don't know how many eyes Lord Ma has. Officer Wang, Officer Wu, there is a gangster here who is obstructing official duties. Please arrest him. After hearing Director Chien's instructions, 2 policemen with guns rushed into the fish house and aimed their sharp eyes directly at Zhu Zhenjun. In response to this, Zhu Zhenjun took out his mobile phone without paying any attention and prepared to contact the official friends he had made. However, when he saw that his cell phone showed that there was no communication signal, his face changed slightly and he immediately took He Tongtong's hand and planned to leave the fish house. In fact, he has always shown himself confident because he believes that with his status as a top wealthy family and successful businessman, as well as the contacts he has accumulated over the years, even the leaders of the municipal party committee and detachment leaders will give him some thin noodles. It will be too difficult for him. But what he never expected was that when the mobile phone signal was completely blocked, not only would he be unable to use the contacts he had accumulated, but he would also be vulnerable to unpredictable dangers. After all, not everyone knows the power of the Zhu family in the provincial capital, and not everyone knows the identity and skills of Zhu Zhenjun. Therefore, adhering to the principle that a gentleman should not build a dangerous wall, he planned to take He Tongtong to leave the commercial street forcibly. 2 police officers, catch them quickly. I suspect they are likely to be carriers of the virus. Seeing Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong getting up to leave the fish house, Director Qian, who had not yet vented his anger, not only immediately ordered 2 policemen to arrest them, but also framed them and slandered them. After hearing Director Qian's slander, the 2 police officers surnamed Wang and Wu changed their faces slightly. At the same time, they immediately took out their pistols, pointed them at Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, and shouted sternly, "Squat on the ground with your hands on your head, otherwise, we will shoot." The reason why they are so nervous is because they have just witnessed the tragic death of villagers in Zhangqiao village and know the danger of this virus infection. Seeing the gun pointed directly at himself and He Tongtong, Zhu Zhenjun immediately stood in front of He Tongtong, and then threatened with a gloomy face. "Put down the gun for me immediately, otherwise, I will make you miserable and walk around in circles." At the same time, He Tongtong directly reached out and hugged Zhu Zhenjun's waist, with sweet and happy tears in his eyes. Although Zhu Zhenjun's clothes were very ordinary, the majestic aura accumulated from a top wealthy family and a successful businessman still made the 2 police officers subconsciously take a step back, which immediately aroused Director Qian's dissatisfaction. 2 police officers, what are your responsibilities? What is your mission? Where has your courage to fight against the gangsters gone? After hearing Director Qian's encouragement, Officer Wang and Officer Li looked at each other, then stepped closer to Zhu Zhenjun with their pistols raised. If you are an ordinary rich kid, when faced with constant threats of gunpoint, you may choose to temporarily tolerate it. After all, if a good man doesn't suffer immediate losses, the worst he can do is cause trouble for them later. But for Zhu Zhenjun, who has an unorthodox thinking, the opponent's pressing step by step only aroused his anger, which is not afraid of life and death. He turned around suddenly, pushed He Tongtong aside, and then pounced directly on Officer Wang, who was slightly ahead. Bang! Zhu Zhenjun unexpectedly pounced on him, causing Officer Wang, who had never had any actual combat experience, to point his gun at Zhu Zhenjun's heart and instinctively pull the trigger. He Tongtong, who was pushed to the ground, turned pale and cried out when he heard the violent gunshots. No. However, just as He Tongtong's shouting sounded, a figure as fast as the wind appeared in front of Zhu Zhenjun and reached out to hold the bullet that was about to hit his heart. The pain of the bullet piercing his heart did not appear, which made Zhu Zhenjun, who instinctively closed his eyes when he heard the gunshots, open his eyes quickly and immediately saw Zhang Fengjai standing in front of him. He was so excited that he couldn't speak. "Brother, you." "Yes, thank you." Seeing Zhang Fengjai appear at the critical moment and catch the bullet in time to save Zhu Zhenjun, He Tongtong, who was also very excited, hurriedly thanked him and got up to check Zhu Zhenjun's condition. Neither paying attention to the excited Zhu Zhenjun nor responding to He Tongtong's thanks, Zhang Fengjai, holding the bullet tightly in his right hand, looked solemnly through the transparent glass window at the 3 armed policemen holding submachine guns rushing quickly outside the fish restaurant. Because the commercial street directly crossed the National Highway 327, the blockade of Zhangqiao village and the commercial street caused serious traffic jams on the National Highway, which resulted in the taxi he was riding being unable to drive to the commercial street. In desperation, he could only rush to the commercial street at a running speed. However, the locked commercial street was temporarily under the highest alert, with no one allowed to leave or enter, so he was also directly blocked outside the commercial street by the armed police who were also guarding it. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuchi. Chapter 204. Weishan Lake Fish House. Originally, Zhang Fengjai wanted to go around to the back of the commercial street that blocked the weak point, and then sneak back to the fish house through the open window. But through the transparent glass window of the fish house, when he saw the two criminal police officers who were arguing pointing their pistols at Zhu Zhenjun, he immediately shot down the armed police in front of him and rushed to the fish house. Because he knew Zhu Zhenjun very well, he knew that Zhu Zhenjun, who was unruly, would not only not succumb to the threat of the pistol, but would even take the initiative to provoke the other party without knowing whether to live or die. The three armed police who quickly rushed into the fish house immediately raised their submachine guns and pointed them at Zhang Fengjai, and then a tall armed police shouted, "Raise your hands. I can only say sorry for the action just now." Although the action just now was to save Zhu Zhenjun, it was ultimately his fault. Moreover, even if they were attacked by him, they had always restrained themselves from shooting, and they were respectable soldiers. Therefore, facing the tall armed police's scolding, Zhang Fengjai took the initiative to apologize and raised his hands to show goodwill. Whether it was the timing and strength of the instant attack, or the terrifying sprint speed like a gust of wind just now, it was enough to prove that the thin boy in front of him was an extremely dangerous person. Therefore, even if he took the initiative to release a gesture of goodwill, the three armed police did not dare to take it lightly and approached Zhang Fengjai step by step with submachine guns. Using the means of grappling, they quickly grabbed Zhang Fengjai's arms and completely restricted his freedom. The armed police who was knocked down by his sneak attack immediately clenched his fists and used a black tiger heart-piercing move. In response, Zhang Fengjai neither struggled to dodge nor mobilized his steel-like body to fight back. He let the opponent's fist hit his abdomen, which was considered to be a repayment for the palm that knocked him down just now. However, when he saw the opponent continue to throw a heavy punch and was about to hit his fragile cheek, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with displeasure, and he immediately mobilized his iron-boned body strength, and then took the initiative to face it. Bang! Accompanied by a loud collision, Zhang Fengjai, who was hit hard, did not even have a trace of redness and swelling on his cheek. On the contrary, the opponent, while taking 2 steps back, his face was slightly distorted and he shook his palm vigorously, looking very painful. "Cheng Chao, what's going on?" the tall armed policeman who held Zhang Fengjai's arm even harder asked hurriedly. "I don't know, it seems that this kid's face is made of reinforced concrete, it's really too damn hard," blowing hard on the red back of his hand, the armed policeman called Cheng Chao explained with a grin. "How is it possible?" The tall armed policeman obviously did not believe the explanation given by his teammates, and then stretched out his fingers to press Zhang Fengjai's cheek, and found that his cheek was exactly the same as his own. "That's enough." Letting the other party hold his arms was to make up for the mistake of forcing through the blockade just now. To bear the opponent's black tiger heart-piercing move was to repay the palm that knocked him down just now. Now, the opponent not only took the initiative to attack his fragile cheek, but also teased his cheek, which gradually made Zhang Fengjai's endurance reach its limit. "Oh, you kid is quite arrogant." Zhang Fengjai's gloomy questioning immediately aroused the dissatisfaction of the tall armed police. After a slightly raised sarcasm, he suddenly exerted force on the palms holding his arms. Humph. The other party's reckless behavior completely aroused the anger that Zhang Fengjai had been suppressing. After a displeased cold snort, he mobilized the strength of his steel-like body and broke free from the opponent's grasp with his arms. Immediately afterwards, his right foot took a step back with his body, and his outstretched palm slapped heavily on the backs of the two armed police, allowing the two of them to have an intimate hug. Afterwards, he mobilized his spiritual power to match the speed of the Qingfeng step, allowing him to take the guns of 3 armed policemen and 2 criminal policemen in the blink of an eye. Who are you? Whether it was the power to break free from the arms being held in an instant, or the fierce palm method of the sharp counterattack, or the speed of taking all the guns as fast as the wind, they were not inferior to their chief instructor, Hong Gang, who was known as the Desert Wolf King. Therefore, the tall armed policeman who was suspicious of Zhang Fenjai's origins reached out to stop Cheng Chao, who wanted to use military fists to fight, and asked with a serious face. Directly throwing the gun he had just taken to the ground, Zhang Fenjai, who was in a bad mood, ignored the tall armed policeman's questioning at all, and turned to look at Zhu Zhenjun and asked, "Brother Zhu, what happened?" Although Zhu Zhenjun's character was a bit unruly and arrogant, he was not the kind of person who caused trouble. Therefore, he needed to know the process and reason of Zhu Zhenjun's conflict with the 2 policemen, and then find a way to resolve the troubles in front of him. "Brother, this is what happened." Turning his head to look at Director Qian and the thin doctor standing in front of the counter, Zhu Zhenjun recounted the details of the conflict that had just occurred. After hearing Zhu Zhenjun's detailed account, the 2 criminal police officers' faces instantly darkened. Although they received orders from their superiors to fully cooperate with the work of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, it did not mean that the leaders of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention could command them at will without principles. What's more, Director Qian of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention issued an arrest order on the grounds of falsely accusing Zhu Zhenjun of being a virus carrier, which was obviously an abuse of power to avenge personal grudges. So, when they looked at Zhu Zhenjun, they showed a trace of shame. Zhang Fenjai, who had heard the whole process of the conflict, secretly breathed a sigh of relief. As long as Zhu Zhenjun was not at fault for the conflict, he could easily resolve the conflict and then go to Zhangqiao village to find Zhang Huijing as soon as possible. 2 police officers, do you police officers care about the crime of abusing power and framing others' innocence? Zhang Fenjai asked seriously, turning around and looking at the 2 policemen with gloomy faces. It's not our responsibility. Although he was quite dissatisfied with Director Qian's practice of taking revenge, there must be 1,000 connections behind him to be able to become a leader at a certain level. Therefore, when faced with a crime that they could either care about or ignore, the 2 policemen who were well versed in human relations finally chose to protect themselves and shook their heads in denial. In response, Zhang Fenjai frowned slightly and glanced at both parties. After a hint of displeasure flashed in his eyes, he said in a cold tone, "If that's the case, then please leave here, officers." Since they had already made the decision to protect themselves, facing Zhang Fenjai's cold tone of expulsion, the 2 officers didn't say much, picked up their pistols, and turned to leave the fish restaurant. "What about you?" Zhang Fenjai reminded the 3 armed police officers in the same cold tone, sweeping his cold eyes over them. "Let's go." After learning the reason why Zhang Fenjai broke through the blockade, the 3 armed police officers chose to forgive each other's mistakes, picked up the submachine guns thrown on the ground, and turned to leave the fish restaurant. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 205. Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant. Turning his head to look at Director Qian, who was paunchy, and the doctor who was as thin as a telephone pole, Zhang Fenjai was too lazy to take action and ordered Zhu Zhenjun. "Brother Zhu, take revenge if you have a grudge, complain if you have a grudge, just don't kill anyone." "Okay." If it weren't for Zhang Fenjai's timely help, he would have died under the gun of the police just now, so Zhu Zhenjun, who had accumulated a lot of anger for a long time, immediately agreed excitedly, shook his head and clenched his fists and walked towards Director Qian and the thin doctor. You, what do you want to do?" After the python meat and Chinese medicine conditioning, Zhu Zhenjun successfully lost more than 150 kilograms of fat, and his body became stronger. "So, Facing Zhu Zhenjun, who was walking towards him, seeing him preparing to take action, Director Qian stepped back and asked with a look of horror. "What do you think?" After asking with a grin, Zhu Zhenjun suddenly accelerated forward and swung his fist to hit Director Qian's abdomen. Then, taking advantage of the opportunity when the other party bent over in pain, he knocked him to the ground with a straight hook. The thin doctor quickly dodged a few steps to the side, and then looked at Zhu Zhenjun with horror. After looking at the cowardly thin doctor with disdain, Zhu Zhenjun directly rode on Director Qian's body, and then began to hit him with fists like raindrops. In response, Zhang Fengjai asked He Tongtong without paying too much attention. "Sister-in-law, do you know where Zhang Huijing's home is?" "I know," He Tongtong nodded and replied. "Then trouble sister-in-law to take me to find her now," Zhang Fengjai hurriedly ordered, worried that the masters of the Supernatural Research Institute would find Zhang Huijing in advance. "Okay." After nodding and replying, He Tongtong turned his head and looked at Zhu Zhenjun, who was still beating Director Qian, with a worried look in his eyes. "Brother Zhu, let's go. If you want to punish Director Qian, there will be plenty of time and opportunities in the future. Just beat him up first to vent your anger." So, in order to let He Tongtong take him to find Zhang Huijing as soon as possible, Zhang Fengjai hurriedly called out, "Mr. Qian, today's beating is just a little interest I will temporarily collect." After hearing Zhang Fengjai's call, Zhu Zhenjun stopped punching and stood up, then threatened Director Qian, who was bruised and swollen. "Next, I will let you truly experience what it means to be unable to live or die in revenge." After the threat, Zhu Zhenjun turned around and chased Zhang Fengjai and He Tongtong. Director Qian, who had been beaten into a pig's head, was not frightened by his threat just now. Instead, he stared at the backs of Zhu Zhenjun and Zhang Fengjai, with a vicious look in his eyes. Because too many people died in Zhangqiao village at the same time, many medical staff, police, and armed police were busy moving and recording the information of the bodies to facilitate the inspection and dissection of the experts who were about to arrive. There was no extra time and manpower to set up a second cordon, which allowed Zhang Fengjai to easily enter the village with Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong. Then, under the leadership of He Tongtong, they soon came to a two-story independent building at the east end of the village. On both sides of the spacious gate, there were two stone lions that did not have any protective function. The red bronze mahogany gate gave people an extremely luxurious feeling. Without too much delay, Zhang Fengjai walked directly to the door, and then stretched out his hand to knock on the door to call for help. But when his right hand just hit the door, the red bronze mahogany door was suddenly pushed open. At the same time, a strong smell of blood came to his face. No, something happened to Zhang Huijing. After turning his head to remind Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, who didn't notice anything unusual, Zhang Fengjai rushed into the yard first. Afterwards, he saw Zhang Huijing, who was disheveled, lying in a pool of blood, with a sharp knife stuck in her heart. After reaching out to block Zhu Zhenjun, who was about to come forward to observe, Zhang Fengjai mobilized his spiritual power to open his eyes, and found that Zhang Huijing's soul after death was sitting next to the body in a daze. Turning his head to signal Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong to stay where they were, Zhang Fengjai walked to Zhang Huijing's body, then looked at her soul and said, "Zhang Huijing, tell me who the murderer is, I will avenge you." Zhang Fengjai's promise gradually awakened Zhang Huijing's soul from its sluggish state. When he saw the disheveled body and the sharp knife stuck in the heart, his clear eyes gradually turned scarlet, and a trace of resentment and evil spirit quickly gathered. Gather your energy and concentrate your mind, and chant the heart-clearing mantra. Seeing Zhang Huijing, who was extremely unwilling to die in humiliation, using the resentment in her heart to induce endless resentment and evil spirits into her body, and quickly transformed into a fierce ghost, Zhang Fengjai immediately pinched his mouth and chanted the heart-clearing mantra, trying his best to eliminate her inner resentment while reminding her loudly, "Zhang Huijing, don't absorb the resentment and evil spirits and transform into a fierce ghost, otherwise you will lose the chance to reincarnate. Although Zhang Huijing and Li Changwan both died after being insulted, Li Changwan was just an ordinary rural woman with a simple and honest nature. Even when she turned into a fierce ghost, she still maintained a bit of kindness and would not hurt innocent people, so she retained a chance to reincarnate. But Zhang Huijing was different. First, she was killed while being humiliated, and the resentment in her heart was far greater than that of Li Changwan, so the amount of resentment and evil spirit gathered was also greater. Second, her cheekbones were high, her face was not friendly, and there was no flesh under her eyes, which was a typical face of a lonely god. Generally, people with this kind of lonely god fate are selfish and ruthless, which will increase the amount of resentment and evil spirit. Third, although the fish monster's blood was used to offset the evil spirit in her body, it would take a certain amount of time for the evil spirit in her soul to completely dissipate. If Zhang Huijing's soul is transformed into a fierce ghost and an evil ghost, and has supernatural powers, it will merge with the remaining evil spirit in her soul. At that time, she is likely to break through the levels of fierce ghosts and evil ghosts one after another, and be promoted to a fang ghost that is not tolerated by heaven and earth, thus completely losing the qualification for reincarnation. More importantly, if Zhang Huijing really advances to the level of A, then he can only turn around and take Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong away from Zhangjiao village. Because the ghosts at the level of have surpassed the level of Qi condensation and reached the foundation building level of Taoism and God, and are no longer powerful beings that he can face. Under the King's In mantra and Zhang Fenjai's loud reminders, Zhang Huijing gradually calmed down from the resentment and hatred. When he looked down at the immortal he once longed to be blessed by, a look of regret appeared in his slightly scarlet eyes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 206. Zhangjiao Village, Zhang Huijing's courtyard. Floating above the corpse, Zhang Huijing looked down at Zhang Fenjai, who looked indifferent, with a look of regret in her eyes. If she hadn't been greedy for the wealth accumulated by the village committee and had given up the opportunity to obtain the grace of the gods, even if her heart was pierced by a sharp knife, the gods' omnipotent means would definitely allow her to be resurrected. After all, a husband and wife for a day is 100 days of grace, and a husband and wife for a day is also a grace. For the sake of his dedicated service, he would never sit idly by. Zhang Huijing, put down all the resentment in your heart, forget all the joys and sorrows in the world, reincarnate and become a new person, and then welcome your new life. Seeing that Zhang Huijing's scarlet eyes gradually became clear, and no longer actively absorbed the resentment and evil spirits that gathered, Zhang Fenjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly persuaded her. Gods and goddesses, can a sinner like me be reincarnated and become a new person? After hearing Zhang Fenjai's persuasion, thinking of the sins she had committed in this life, Zhang Huijing asked with expectation and nervousness in her eyes. Of course, as long as you. Judging from Zhang Huijing's face, although she had committed many mistakes in her life, most of them were just mistakes in morality and private life, which were not too serious sins. Moreover, being killed in the process of being insulted, this more humiliating and brutal way of death can almost offset the mistakes she had committed. So, facing Zhang Huijing's expectant and nervous gaze, Zhang Fenjai nodded and gave hope, and planned to continue to persuade her to resolve the resentment in her heart and reincarnate as soon as possible. But at this moment, a stern shout suddenly came from his ears, interrupting his words of persuasion. A little soul dared to transform into a fierce ghost in broad daylight. It's too arrogant and too ignorant. See how I, the soul-destroying Star Lord, will scare you to death. Accompanied by a fierce rebuke, a young man in a white suit, handsome, elegant, about 24 or 25 years old, rushed into the courtyard quickly, waving the sword condensed by spiritual power in his hand, and shot a silver sword light straight to Zhang Huijing's eyebrows. Stop it! Since Zhang Huijing was willing to reincarnate and become a new person, Zhang Fengjai relaxed his vigilance and dispersed his spiritual power. So, when he saw the handsome young man rushing into the courtyard, swinging his sword and shooting the sword light straight to Zhang Huijing, he had no time to resist, and could only stop him in a hurry. Let alone the arrogant handsome young man, he would not listen to his orders at all. Even if he wanted to stop as ordered, facing the silver sword light that had already been shot out, the handsome young man was already powerless to retract it, or to forcibly change the direction of the attack. Puff! Accompanied by a slight cracking sound, the silver sword light shot directly into the eyebrows of Zhang Huijing's soul, which gradually replaced the expectation and tension in her eyes with dead silence. At the same time, Zhang Fengjai couldn't help but turn his head with a sudden change of expression and shouted at the handsome young man who was complacent and had no idea that he had caused a big disaster. Ignorant guy, who told you to attack just now? Faced with Zhang Fengjai's sharp rebuke, the smile on the handsome young man's face was instantly replaced by coldness. After his left hand passed the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power, he warned with anger in his eyes. Boy, do you know who I am? Do you know what will happen if you offend me? Foolish and ignorant guy, I don't want to know who you are now, and I don't care about the consequences of offending you. I just want to tell you, do you know what kind of disaster your self-righteous attack will bring to the lives of dozens of miles around? Although the handsome young man's cultivation has also reached the realm of spiritual power transformation, when he thought of Zhang Huijing's next terrifying transformation, Zhang Fengjai could not suppress his anger and shouted, then turned and walked to Zhu Zhenjun and he tong and ordered. Brother Zhu, sister-in-law, let's leave here quickly. Boy, explain your words to me clearly, otherwise, you can't leave here at all. The handsome young man with spiritual power and martial arts skills instantly blocked the bronze mahogany door, and then pointed his sword at Zhang Fengjai and threatened. Ignorant fool, get out of my way immediately, otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless. Zhang Fengjai, who also used his spiritual power to condense a sharp sword, warned with a gloomy face. No wonder you dare to be so arrogant in front of me. You were originally a core disciple of the Taoist sect who had reached the 7th level of qi condensation. When the handsome young man saw the tender and young appearance of Zhang Fengjai, who used his spiritual power to condense a sharp sword, a strong murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and he said with a hint of disdain and sarcasm. But unfortunately, the so-called core disciple of the Taoist sect is nothing more than a waste of silver wax spear in front of me, the soul-destroying Star Lord Park Yishan. Really, Zhang Fengjai slowly raised the sharp sword in his hand and pointed it at Park Yishan, and asked back with an indifferent look. If he was in a hurry to leave Zhangqiao village just now, it was because he was afraid of Zhang Huijing after her transformation. Then, facing Park Yishan's arrogant and ignorant sarcasm and reckless provocation, Zhang Fengjai decided to take the risk and stay, giving him a lesson he would never forget, so that he would know what it means that there are always people better than you. Puff. Just as Zhang Fengjai raised his sword and asked back, Zhu Zhenjun behind him suddenly burst into laughter, which made he Tong couldn't help asking. Little pig, what are you laughing at? It seems that this brother is not only rich, but also has a great body. Otherwise, how could he have been a whore for a lifetime? Zhu Zhenjun deliberately emphasized the teasing tone on the other party's surname, which made he Tong and Zhang Fengjai also think of that kind of thing, and they couldn't help laughing. Damn it! Since leaving the closed environment and starting to perform tasks, and knowing the other meaning of his name, the 3 words whore for a lifetime have become his Achilles heel. Whoever dares to mention the special meaning of whore for a lifetime will die. So, after an angry curse in his heart, Park Yishan, who combined his spiritual power with his martial arts skills, flashed in front of Zhu Zhenjun. Immediately afterwards, the sharp sword condensed by the spiritual power directly slashed towards his long yang, in revenge for Zhu Zhenjun's ridicule of his name just now. Bang! However, when the sharp sword was half a meter away from Zhu Zhenjun's Long Yang, Zhang Fengjie used the sharp sword condensed by the spiritual power to slash heavily on his sharp sword. While easily helping Zhu Zhenjun out of the siege, he almost lost his sword due to the powerful shock. Autumn wind cuts the fallen leaves? Although he seemed to be at a disadvantage in the brief fight just now, it was actually because of his anger that he attacked at the wrong time and target, which eventually gave Zhang Fengjie a slight advantage. Therefore, Pu Yishan, who didn't care about the defeat just now, quickly retreated to a certain distance, and then used exquisite swordsmanship to attack Zhang Fengjie. Zhang Fengjie, who was also unwilling to be outdone, immediately used exquisite swordsmanship to meet him. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 207. Zhangjiao Village, Zhang Huijing's home. Brother Park, Zhang Fengjie, both of you stop. Just when the sharp swords condensed by spiritual power were about to clash, Zhuang Jian, who was wearing a black leather jacket and leather pants, shouted to stop them and rushed between the two people as fast as the wind, which forced Zhang Fengjie and Park Yishan to quickly retract their swords. Seeing Zhuang Jian risking her life to block each other's attacks, Park Yishan immediately questioned with an unhappy look. "Junior sister Zhuang, what are you doing?" Although Zhang Fengjie didn't say anything about this, he also showed a look of dissatisfaction in his eyes when he looked at Zhuang Jian. "Brother Park, this elegant young man is called Zhang Fengjie, and he is highly regarded by instructor Zhao." Without paying attention to Park Yishan's questioning, Zhuang Jian pointed at Zhang Fengjie with her right hand and introduced him. Then, she put down her right hand pointing at Zhang Fengjie, and raised her left hand to point at Park Yishan and introduced him. "Zhang Fengjie, this handsome senior brother is called Park Yishan. He is one of the 8 heroes of our Supernatural Research Institute. He is responsible for dealing with some more difficult supernatural phenomena and is also highly valued by the superiors." Then, Zhuang Jian frowned and asked, "Brother Park, Zhang Fengjie, who can explain to me the reason for the action just now?" After looking at each other, Park Yishan, who knew the strict discipline of the institute, was afraid that Zhang Fengjie would confuse right and wrong and slander him, so he quickly pointed at Zhang Huijing floating in the air and said, "Junior sister Zhuang, the cause of the conflict was because of the soul that wanted to transform into a fierce ghost. The cause of the conflict was that this kid not only prevented me from killing the soul that transformed into a fierce ghost, but also humiliated me in every way afterwards. Zhang Fengjie, please give me a reasonable explanation." Although they didn't know each other for a long time, Zhang Fengjie always gave me the impression of being a polite and elegant gentleman. Therefore, Zhuang Jian did not completely believe Park Yishan's accusation just now, but looked directly into Zhang Fengjie's eyes, hoping that he could give a reason to refute it. "Teacher Zhuang, no matter the cause of the conflict or the reason for the conflict, what Park Yishan said just now is correct." Ignoring Zhuang Jian's gaze, Zhang Fengjie looked up at Zhang Huijing floating in the air, and when he saw the dead silence in her eyes replaced by scarlet again, he nodded to accept Park Yishan's accusation, and asked solemnly, "But do you know why I did this?" Zhuang Jian also found that Zhang Huijing's soul was a little inappropriate, so she hurriedly asked, "Why?" "It was because this stupid, ignorant, arrogant, and self-righteous guy attacked the soul without authorization, destroyed my efforts to persuade the other party to reincarnate voluntarily, and caused a disaster that was difficult to stop." "Zhang Fengjie, don't spit blood," Park Yishan, holding the sword tightly, immediately warned angrily. "Zhang Fengjie, what's going on?" After signaling Park Yishan not to get angry for the time being, Zhuang Jian continued to ask. "Humph." After a slight sneer, Zhang Fengjie turned around and looked at Zhuang Jian's reply. "Because the soul is different from ordinary ghosts, the various hardships she encountered in her life have given her the potential to directly attack the, so I will use various methods to resolve her inner resentment and let her accept the hope of reincarnation. This is impossible." After hearing Zhang Fengjie's explanation, Park Yushin immediately jumped up and refuted. Zhang Fenjai, a ghost at the level of a Fang ghost is a terrifying existence at the foundation building stage. A ghost with outstanding talent needs at least 1,000 years to have a glimmer of hope of being promoted to a Fang ghost. A mere soul that has just left the body has the potential and strength to directly impact a Fang ghost. I'm afraid this is the biggest joke I've ever heard in my life. Pu Yishin's rebuttal made Zhuang Jian look at Zhang Fenjai with a look of doubt. In response, Zhang Fenjai was too lazy to continue explaining. He directly dispersed the sharp sword condensed by spiritual power, walked towards the door, and reminded him with a cold expression. If you don't believe it, you can stay here and wait to see the final transformation of the soul that can resist the sword attack just after leaving the body. If it doesn't transform into A in the end, you too can easily kill it with your strength. Then I will wait for you at Weishan Lake Fish Restaurant in the commercial street, waiting for Brother Park's humiliation and slap in the face. If it transforms into A, forget it. I guess by then we will be separated by yin and yang, and I'm afraid we won't have the chance to meet again until 100 years later. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's reminder before leaving, Park Yushin flashed a look of disdain in his eyes, and turned to look at the ghost that began to devour resentment and evil spirits. Although Zhuang Jian's eyes showed a hint of hesitation, she finally chose to believe Park Yushin and stayed. After leaving Zhang Huijing's courtyard, Zhang Fenjai stepped back 2 steps, grabbed Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong's arms, and mobilized the Danshan spiritual power to remind them. Brother Zhu, sister-in-law, relax and don't resist. I will speed up and take you back to the fish restaurant. Then, the spiritual power was added to Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, reducing their body weight. The Qingfeng step made them turn into a breeze and rushed out of Zhangqiao village, and then headed straight for the commercial street 3 miles away. In the end, in less than a minute, they successfully returned to the fish restaurant on the commercial street. Immediately afterwards, Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, who could not bear the extreme speed, vomited directly while holding the table. In response, Zhang Fenjai turned a blind eye to it, took out all the blank talisman papers from his sleeves, and then used the remaining dozen drops of black python blood to draw all the talismans he knew. 5 minutes later, after putting away all the drawn talismans, Zhang Fenjai solemnly instructed Zhu Zhenjun. Brother Zhu, when chaos breaks out in Zhangqiao village, you immediately take your sister-in-law to break through the blockade and return to Guanghe Huafu. Brother, what happened? Whether it was Zhang Huijing who was killed accidentally, or the conflict between Zhang Fenjai and Park Yushin, and their argument about ghosts just now, the series of things that happened just now filled Zhu Zhenjun's heart with endless questions. But he never took the initiative to ask because the timing and environment were not right at that time. Now, seeing the large number of talismans prepared by Zhang Fenjai and the solemn instructions just now, he felt that the matter was serious and wanted to know what was going on more urgently. In response, Zhang Fenjai shook his head and refused, and walked out of the fish restaurant and returned to Zhangqiao village. Xiaozu, since Yezi is unwilling to say more, he must have his own difficulties, so don't ask any more questions. Seeing Zhu Zhenjun planning to chase him out, He Tongtong quickly reached out and pulled him to persuade him. Alas! Looking at Zhang Fenjai who had disappeared in the commercial street, Zhu Zhenjun finally couldn't help sighing, and turned his head to He Tongtong and ordered. Tongtong, you go upstairs and pack up now, and then we will go to the car and wait for the opportunity to break through the blockade. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 208. Zhangqiao Village. Without the burden of Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, Zhang Fenjai returned to the redwood gate of Zhang Huijing's house in just a dozen seconds. In fact, the reason why he risked his life to come back was that he couldn't bear to see tens of thousands of innocent people in Zhangqiao village and dozens of miles around die tragically in the revenge of the resentment, and he also wanted to rely on his own life-saving trump card to see if he could save Zhang Huijing's soul. After all, Zhang Huijing was the first woman to see and touch his Longyang life, and the first woman who almost made him officially promoted to a man. When he saw that the originally open redwood gate was tightly closed, his face changed slightly, and he quickly mobilized the Danshan spiritual power to open the sky eye, and immediately saw that the endless resentment and evil spirit had completely enveloped the entire yard. He took a deep breath, took out 2 evil-breaking talismans from his sleeves, and used the spiritual power to stimulate the flames formed by the talismans to shoot directly at the redwood gate. Bang, bang. Accompanied by 2 consecutive collision sounds, the flames formed by the 2 evil-breaking talismans were instantly bounced away. At the same time, 2 streams of resentment and evil spirits immediately emerged from the mahogany door and merged into a black gas, and then rushed directly into the stone lions on both sides of the door. Afterwards, the 2 stone lions carved from stone slowly stood up, raised their heads and roared silently, and then fiercely rushed towards him. Facing the 2 stone lions that rushed over quickly, Zhang Fengjai did not panic at all. While retreating one after another, he quickly mobilized the strength of his steel and iron bones, and then took the initiative to meet them with the killing fist taught by his second grandfather. After dodging the sharp claws of a stone lion, the iron fist suddenly hit the huge head of the stone lion, directly knocking the stone lion back 3 steps. At the same time, his legs kicked out a series of kicks sideways, directly kicking the forelimbs of another stone lion. Afterwards, the strength of the body quickly gathered into a sky-high punch on the right hand, smashing the stone lion that had just been repelled and attacked again. Then, while stepping on the ground with both feet and rising into the air, a scissor kick completely strangled the second stone lion. After standing firmly on the ground with his right hand, Zhang Fengjai immediately took out 4 evil-breaking talismans from his sleeves, and used his spiritual power to stimulate the flames formed by the talismans and shot them at the mahogany door again. Squeak. Accompanied by the heavy and oppressive sound of the door opening, the mahogany door was slowly opened, revealing the picture of the harvest of grains depicted on the wall behind the door. Although the mahogany door was blasted open by the flames burning from the 4 evil-breaking talismans, Zhang Fengjai not only did not rush in immediately, but his face showed an extremely solemn look. Because the strong resentment and evil spirits filled in the yard not only did not rush out wildly with the opening of the mahogany door, but were restrained and stayed at the edge of the door. This shows that Zhang Huijing not only successfully advanced to the wolf ghost realm, but also has mastered the perception and power of the wolf ghost realm. A ghost of the level of A is comparable to the existence of the foundation building period. It is a powerful person like the grandfather third who is a god of Taoism. Zhang Fengjai suddenly lost his confidence whether the power left to him by the special beings in Shushan can defeat Zhang Huijing who has advanced to the level of A. Bang! Just when Zhang Fengjai was hesitating whether to risk breaking into the yard, Zhuang Jian, who was wearing a black leather jacket and leather pants, fell heavily in front of the door like a kite with a broken string, and then spit out several mouthfuls of blood. Seeing Zhuang Jian, whose face was as pale as paper and whose breath was as low as a dying patient, the hesitation in Zhang Fengjai's eyes was immediately replaced by determination. Then, he immediately took out 6 evil-breaking talismans and used spiritual power to drive them. After using the 6 evil-breaking talismans to blast away the resentment and evil spirit that enveloped Zhuang Jian, he flashed to the side of Zhuang Jian, then bent down and picked her up and walked out of the door. "It's you." Zhuang Jian, who had closed her eyes and waited for death, slowly opened her eyes when she felt the warm and strong embrace, and then saw Zhang Fengjai who was taking her pulse, and her eyes suddenly showed a look of surprise. "Your internal organs have been forcibly displaced, and your meridians are occupied by resentment and evil spirits. It will take at least 1 month for you to recover completely." After retracting the fingers on Zhuang Jian's wrist, Zhang Fengjai reminded her with a long sigh of relief. "Zhang Fengjai, thank you." Zhuang Jian looked at Zhang Fengjai without caring about her injuries, and her eyes showed tenderness like water. After all, knowing that Zhang Huijing could advance to the level of Liu Gui in advance, she still risked coming back to save herself. I am afraid that any woman would be moved by Zhang Fenjai's selfless love, and at the same time, she would have a special feeling in her heart. Ignoring Zhuang Jian's tender gaze and her sincere thanks, Zhang Fenjai stretched out his hand to seal several of her acupuncture points in succession to prevent the resentment and evil spirits in her meridians from eroding her dantian and internal organs. Then, he looked up at the yard shrouded by thick resentment and evil spirits, and ordered with a serious look. "Teacher Zhuang, please give me a detailed introduction to the changes that happened in the yard after I left." When Zhang Fenjai mentioned the changes in the yard, the tenderness in Zhuang Jian's eyes was instantly replaced by fear, and she reminded anxiously. "Zhang Fenjai, do you have the means to contact your elders? Are there any strong men in the foundation building stage among your elders?" "Although my elder is a strong man in the foundation building stage, I don't have the means to contact him." Zhang Fenjai, who could guess Zhuang Jian's thoughts, hurriedly shook his head and explained. "Zhang Fenjai, please take me to the village committee compound of Zhangqiao village now. I need to contact the leaders of the Supernatural Research Institute immediately and ask them to send strong people in the foundation building period to support us." After hearing Zhang Fenjai's explanation with a shake of his head, Zhuang Jian struggled to stand up and said anxiously. "Otherwise, tens of thousands of people in a radius of dozens of miles will die tragically in the revenge of the Fang ghosts." Without following Zhuang Jian's instructions, Zhang Fenjai directly reached out and pressed her shoulders to stop her from forcibly getting up, and said with a calm expression. "Teacher Zhuang, don't be anxious, listen to me first. First, even if you can contact a senior in the foundation building stage, I'm afraid he won't be able to arrive for a while. Second, the soul of the realm can perfectly control resentment and evil spirits while maintaining absolute clarity of mind. It just so happens that I not only know Zhang Huijing's soul, but also have a good relationship with each other. I want to rely on the friendship of acquaintance to persuade her to give up the idea of resentment and revenge. Third, I have a life-saving trump card given by my elders. Even if Zhang Huijing is unwilling to give up the idea of resentment and revenge in the end, the life-saving trump card can delay for half an hour. At that time, you can contact the foundation building senior of the Supernatural Research Institute, and evacuate the people within a radius of dozens of miles in advance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yanyun Yuqi. Chapter 209. Zhangqiao Village, in front of the Redwood Gate. Okay. After hearing Zhang Fenjai's suggestion, Zhuang Jian thought about it for a while, nodded in agreement, and began to introduce in detail the situation of Zhang Huijing's soul upgrading to the N Park Yishan. Less than a minute after he left the yard with Zhu Zhenjun and He Tongtong, Zhang Huijing's soul began to upgrade crazily after absorbing a lot of resentment and evil spirit. In about 40 seconds, the soul easily upgraded to the realm of the evil ghost. In about 1 minute and 30 seconds, the evil ghost easily upgraded to the realm of the evil ghost. At this time, Park Yishan, who felt that something was wrong, tried his best to attack Zhang Huijing, but in the end he couldn't even break the gathered resentment and evil spirit. In about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, while the evil ghost realm was forcibly upgraded to the, Zhang Huijing's soul turned ink black. If it weren't for Park Yishan's timely use of the defensive spell given by the strong man of the Supernatural Research Institute, they would have been forcibly devoured by the huge resentment and evil spirit that gathered in an instant, and the soul in the sea of consciousness would have been wiped out, turning into a corpse without any vitality. However, the material used by the senior who gave the spell to draw the spell was just the blood of the monster that had just advanced to the foundation building period, and the defensive power was very limited. If it was just to protect one person, it could last for about 10 minutes. If it was to protect 2 people at the same time, it would only last for less than 3 minutes at most. Therefore, in order to give Park Yishan, one of the 8 heroes of the Supernatural Research Institute, a glimmer of life, Zhuang Jian took the initiative to leave the protection of the defensive spell, and was eventually blown away by Zhang Huijing, who was promoted to the realm of the, and hit the wall at the door with a glance. Of course, Park Yishan was not moved by Zhuang Jian's active sacrifice and persuaded her to stay. When she was attacked by Zhang Huijing's eyes, he did not rescue her in time. This is why Zhuang Jian completely opened her heart to Zhang Fengjie after being rescued. After hearing Zhuang Jian's detailed introduction, Zhang Fengjie's solemn expression suddenly eased a lot. First of all, the realm of the Fang Ghost is divided into 3 levels, namely the Black Vengeful Fang Ghost, the White Evil Fang Ghost, and the Purple King Fang Ghost. The Black Vengeful Fang Ghost is equivalent to the early stage of foundation building, the White Evil Fang Ghost is equivalent to the middle stage of foundation building, and the Purple King Fang Ghost is equivalent to the late stage of foundation building. The power left to him by those special beings in Shushan is infinitely close to the White Evil Fang Ghost in the middle stage of foundation building, which can ensure that when Zhang Huijing turns against him, he can use that power to counter-attack and save his life in time. Secondly, Zhang Huijing only used the momentum of his eyes to severely injure Zhuang Jian instead of killing her directly, which shows that Zhang Huijing's mind was not affected too much by resentment and evil spirit, so he could use his subsequent persuasion. Therefore, Zhang Fengjie, who was already certain in his heart, bent down to pick up Zhuang Jian, and sent her directly to the haystack at the entrance of the alley, and then solemnly warned her. "Teacher Zhuang, you rest here and wait first. If I can successfully persuade Zhang Huijing to give up the idea of revenge and let her return to where she should go, that would be the best outcome. If persuasion fails, I will use the life-saving trump card given by my elders to deal with her. You should know that the fight between strong men at the foundation building level will inevitably cause a sensation like a landslide, and will definitely alarm the armed police and police stationed in Zhangqiao village. At that time, they will definitely be able to find you in advance, and then take you to contact the strong men of the Supernatural Research Institute. Be careful," Zhuang Jian warned with a worried look in her eyes. "Yes." After nodding, Zhang Fengjie turned back to the Redwood Gate, and then took out 5 evil-breaking talismans and stuck them on his shoulders, legs and back. Then, he took out 2 evil-breaking talismans and held them in his hands. Then, he took a deep breath and stepped into the Redwood Gate with a solemn look. Just as he stepped into the Redwood Gate, Zhuang Jian, who was lying on the haystack, was about to mobilize the Danshan spiritual power to expel the resentment and evil spirits in the meridians, when he suddenly heard light footsteps. Looking up, he saw 2 nurses from the affiliated hospital, carrying medical boxes, appearing at the entrance of the village. Without hearing Zhang Fengjie's instructions, Zhuang Jian hurriedly greeted them and was supported by them to go to the courtyard of the village committee, and then used the special equipment left in the car to contact the leaders of the Supernatural Research Institute. Just as his legs had just stepped over the threshold of the Redwood Gate, the strong resentment and evil spirits that enveloped him instantly pressed him to kneel down. Fortunately, he mobilized his physical strength in time, and cooperated with the 2 evil-breaking talismans in his hands to successfully resist the pressure brought by the resentment and evil spirit, and did not succumb to the strong pressure. Step by step, Zhang Fengjie came to the yard through the corridor at the door. He immediately saw Park Yishan, who was protected by the green light shield, and Zhang Huijing floating in the air. Seeing Zhang Fengjie suddenly appear in the yard, Park Yishan, who was using the defense talisman to resist the resentment and evil spirit, immediately showed regret and resentment in his eyes. Regretted that he was too arrogant to create the, and resented Zhang Fengjie for not continuing to persuade him, which eventually led to his fatal danger. Feeling the approach of a strange breath, Zhang Huijing, who was closing her eyes to familiarize herself with the power of the, suddenly opened her eyes and glared. With just a simple glance, Zhang Fengjie immediately felt an unimaginable terrifying force, which hit him hard, making him unable to control the powerful force and step back several steps. "It's you." When she saw that the person who broke into the yard was the immortal she had wanted to bless, Zhang Huijing immediately waved her hand to disperse the bombardment. Quickly calming the spiritual power that was just about to attack, Zhang Fengjai returned to the yard, and then looked up at Zhang Huijing, who had advanced to the realm, with a flash of surprise in his eyes. Because at this time, Zhang Huijing, whether in clothing and appearance or temperament and momentum, has undergone earth-shaking changes. The originally torn dark blue dress was replaced by a jet black long skirt, and with the pale skin like white paper, it gave people a weak and charming desire to protect. The deep and dark eyes, coupled with the cold and noble temperament, and the indifferent momentum between the eyebrows, gave people an impulse to conquer. If Zhang Huijing before becoming a was a beautiful rose, then she who had advanced to the realm was a combination of an iceberg snow lotus and. At this time, the charm exuded by Zhang Huijing was far greater than that of Sulitzi, whom he deeply loved, Shen Loxi, Lin Shalan, Xiao Yuxuan and others he had met. The Best Physiognomist. Author, Yan Yun Yuqi. Chapter 210. Zhangqiao Village, in the courtyard of Zhang Huijing's home. Since we once knew each other, I will temporarily spare your life today. After waving his hand to disperse the resentment and evil spirit that enveloped Zhang Fengjai, Zhang Huijing ordered indifferently. Now you go. Pu Yishan, who was using the blue light shield formed by the defensive spell to resist the resentment and evil spirit with all his strength, looked at Zhang Fengjai with eager and pleading eyes. Because the defensive shield formed by the spell has reached its limit, it will completely collapse in more than a minute at most. Focusing on spiritual practice, his physical defense is not much stronger than Zhuang Jian. If he loses the protection of the blue light shield formed by the defensive spell, facing the terrifying pressure formed by the strong resentment and evil spirit, the final result will definitely be the collapse of the physical body, and the soul will be completely crushed by the resentment and evil spirit, and there will be no chance of reincarnation. Therefore, he hopes that Zhang Fengjai can take him with him when he leaves. But Zhang Fengjai's next answer instantly shattered the hope that had just emerged in his heart. No, I won't leave. Zhang Fengjai shook his head directly to reject Zhang Huijing's kindness. Why? Zhang Huijing asked in confusion, with a hint of doubt in her deep and dark eyes. While taking a step forward suddenly, Zhang Fengjai said solemnly. Because I want to help you, otherwise, I don't need to risk being killed and come back again. When he heard Zhang Fengjai confess the reason for his return, a touch of emotion flashed in Zhang Huijing's dark eyes. But thinking of the memory inheritance given by heaven and earth when he was promoted to the realm just now, the emotion in his eyes was instantly replaced by silence, and he asked with a hint of self-mockery in his tone. How do you want to help me? Continue to let me resolve the reincarnation of my inner resentment. As a with strength comparable to the foundation building stage, the essence of the soul has been separated from the three realms, not bound by the 6 reincarnations, and has lost the hope of reincarnation. Therefore, facing Zhang Huijing, who already knew that she had lost the qualification to reincarnate, Zhang Fengjai neither dared nor wanted to lie and shook his head. Then, he turned his head to look at the blue light shield formed by the defensive spell, and found that there were already fine cracks on the surface of the blue light shield. After a flash of cold light in his eyes, he looked up and said to Zhang Huijing. Although I don't have the ability to help you reincarnate now, I can find a blessed place for you to live and practice in seclusion, so that you can avoid the pursuit of the Supernatural Research Institute, the Taoist sect and the Demon Clan, while continuing to impact the realm of the White Evil Fang Ghost and the Purple King Fang Ghost. After hearing the help given by Zhang Fengjai, Zhang Huijing's eyes showed a hint of intention, but Pu Yishan's eyes flashed with shock and viciousness. After a brief moment of deep thought, Park Yishan clenched his right fist and hammered his chest hard, spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood on the green light shield. After using the blood to enhance the threat of the talisman's defense, he hurriedly bowed to Zhang Huijing and reminded her. Senior, don't believe Zhang Fengjai's lies. Because he is a core disciple from a Taoist sect, The people in the Taoist sect are a group of hypocrites who are sweet-mouthed and treacherous, and a group of insidious villains who say one thing and do another. I suspect that the place he arranged for you to practice cultivation is probably a trap set by the sect in advance, with the purpose of capturing you alive and then using it to refine elixirs that can greatly improve your cultivation. After hearing Park Yishin's sinister and vicious reminder, Zhang Huijing's eyes were instantly replaced by anger, and she looked at Zhang Fengjai with a strong murderous aura. At the same time, the dispelled resentment and evil spirit enveloped him again, forcing him to step back 3 steps in succession. In response, Zhang Fengjai looked up at Zhang Huijing without panic, and then mobilized the power given by the special beings in Shushan. As a terrifying power that made Zhang Huijing and Park Yishin feel palpitations slowly rose from Zhang Fengjai's body, the resentment and evil spirit shrouded him quickly retreated behind Zhang Huijing like a mouse seeing a cat. At the same time, as the emerging terrifying power continued to spread, the blue light shield blessed by the blood essence instantly collapsed with countless cracks, which made Park Yishin, who had completely lost his protection, kneel on the ground. While using his mind to control the continuous expansion of the terrifying power, Zhang Fengjai looked at Zhang Yujing with a look of shock in his eyes and asked, "Zhang Huijing, how powerful is this power I have?" "Very strong, very terrifying. Can it defeat you?" "Not only can it defeat me, but it can also easily kill me." After hearing Zhang Huijing's modest answer, Zhang Fengjai's eyes flashed with a look of surprise. After all, those special beings in Shushan were affected by the seal in their bodies and could only exert less than 1% of their own strength. The power given by them barely reached the middle stage of foundation building. However, when he saw the fear flashing in Zhang Huijing's eyes, and combined with her life experience before she was promoted to the realm, he knew that he had made a common-sense mistake. Although Zhang Huijing, who had been promoted to the realm, had a terrifying strength comparable to that of the foundation building period, her background as an ordinary rural woman made her suddenly obtain supernatural power. Let alone 100% of the strength, it would be very good if she could exert half of her strength. Therefore, Zhang Fengjai, who was more confident in his heart, used his mind to control the terrifying power to keep approaching Zhang Huijing, and continued to ask with an indifferent look. "With only the life-saving trump card given to me by the seniors in the retreat area, I can easily kill you, so do I need to go to great lengths to set up traps to trap you?" "No need." Feeling the approaching terrifying force that could easily destroy herself, Zhang Huijing landed on the ground trembling, and then hurriedly shook her head and replied. Seeing Zhang Huijing completely surrendered, Zhang Fengjai secretly breathed a sigh of relief, turned his head and looked at Park Yishin who was kneeling on the ground, and deliberately shook his head with disappointment on his face. "Park Yishin, originally I was going to save your life for Zhuang Jian's sake, but what you did just now really made me angry and disappointed, so. Zhang Fengjai, I am an elite member of the Supernatural Research Institute, one of the 8 heroes valued by the superiors." Hearing that Zhang Fengjai was going to retaliate against his previous false accusation, Park Yishin not only did not feel the slightest fear, but instead looked up and looked directly at Zhang Fengjai's threat. "If you dare to hurt me today, not only will your superiors and the experts at the Supernatural Research Institute not let you go, but even the sect behind you will be completely destroyed."